Welcome back, vinyl community. Update time again. Started the last video off with a Hawaiian needle drop. Thought I'd do it again. Return appearance on my channel. The man called Lee Fernandez off the Hapa LP. Found another copy on vinyl. It's kind of an ongoing saga. Found this originally in the thrift store. My original copy, it was signed by him. Never heard of it before, looked kind of cool. The man knew how to rock a leisure suit. Actually got contacted by his daughter. She didn't have a copy of the LP herself. He had passed away some years ago. Sent my original copy to her. She finally sent me a CD version. I was just showing this a couple of videos back, then walk into the thrift store and Lee is back again. Apparently he used to perform around my area, so I guess it's not that surprising, but only the second copy I've ever found. Had to pick it up. Feel like this record and I are connected now. Lee Fernandez. Don't let the teddy bear appearance fool you though. 6th degree black belt in karate, 3rd degree in judo, 2nd degree in aikido, Navy SEAL in Vietnam, still fondly remembered by his family. Performed a lot in children's charities, appeared on telethons and things like that. Did the talk show circuit, Johnny Carson, Merv Griffin. Based out of Maui, Lee Fernandez. Also there at the thrift store at the same time, found an upgrade copy of Mary Hopkins' debut album, Postcard, on Apple Records. I think this is around 1968-ish, produced by Paul McCartney. She was kind of a protege of his, the winsome Mary Hopkins from Wales. He was kind of marketing her as a pop songstress. She was more in the folk roots. Got a later album by her too. Also found Perez Prado. It's a very early one, late 50s, around 1960-ish, I think. On the Coronet label, very nice shape for its age. Always pick him up when I see him. King of the Mambo, originally from Cuba, based out of Mexico. Cool cover right there, I like that one. Always pick his records up when I see them in good shape. This was one I'd heard of, kind of been keeping an eye out for. The cover's kind of beat on it, basically pretty much separated, but the vinyl's in good shape. Poussey. It's a disco album from 1979. Produced and overseen by jazz fusion drummer Alphonse Mouzon, taking a stab at the disco genre, and it's a good one. Some thumping beats on here. Just disco heaven. Found a Latin one. Again, cover's really beat here, but the vinyl's in good shape. This is a guy I've picked up a record from before, so I knew who he was. He's actually Brazilian, Roberto Carlos, album called Fee. I think this is from 1982, some sources say 1978, CBS label. One of the biggest stars of the Latin world, from Brazil, was closely associated with Erasmo Carlos. They had kind of a songwriting partnership going on. Mainly known for kind of his early rock and roll roots, then he switched to kind of a more ballad-based style. This has kind of got a mix of both. It's got Jesu Cristo, which is kind of a gospel rocking number, and just a nice selection of tunes on here. A song called Amigo on here was apparently played for the Pope in the late 70s when he visited Roberto Carlos. Also came with a bonus record inside the sleeve, totally different. Enrique Guzman, I don't know as much about him. Apparently one of the pioneers of rock and roll in Mexico. Album de Oro. This one didn't grab me as much, kind of ballady. Another thrift find, James Griffiths, you'll recognize this one. The Shadows, String of Hits on the MFP label. Music for Pleasure, EMI. 1979, kind of the British Ventures guitar-based instrumentals. A lot of covers on here: Classical Gas, Bridge Over Troubled Water, Heart of Glass, mixed bag, some good stuff. Even one kind of disco-y number. But don't often see Shadows in my area, so had to grab that. Last one from this particular thrift haul was a reggae one I've had for many years. This is an upgrade copy. Third World, Prisoner in the Street. This is a live album from 1980, soundtrack to a film from the Island label. They were a reggae band, kind of an offshoot of another group called Inner Circle. Some members defected and set up Third World. Still carrying on today. Only a couple of the original members are left. Lead vocals by the great William Bunny Ruggs Clark, sadly departed. Great voice. They got kind of some stick from reggae purists for having a broader sound, more commercial perhaps. Also influenced by Philadelphia Soul. They had a big hit with the cover of the OJ's Now That We Found Love, which is included on here. But great band. You can't go wrong with any of their albums up to the very early 80s. Last video I was showing a reggae haul I found at one of my local record shops. Got a few more from there I'll show today. This one is reggae singer Half Pint, Money Man Skank, very early album from him from 1984 on the iconic Jammies label. This was Prince Jammy's label. In a couple of years he would be calling himself King Jammy and go on to dominate reggae over the next couple of years of the decade, the 1980s. This is him really starting to step out as a producer. Half Pint was a singer, diminutive in size, hence his nickname. Better known or born as Lyndon Roberts, made kind of the usual sound system rounds, performing live in the dance hall with that sort of energy and versatility that was required to entertain a live audience, and would go on to dominate the records of the 1980s in Jamaica. And this is one of his best. Money Man Skank contains a couple of big hits from him in the title track. Poochie Lou, Mr. Landlord, Ease Up Mr. Landlord, We Can't Take a Pressure in the Yard. And even got a cover of the old folk chestnut, If I Had a Hammer, that swings. He's got sort of an irrepressible personality that comes across on record. Kind of a nasal tone to his vocals. I don't know if some of these guys, you wouldn't necessarily call them good singers, but somehow they make these classic records that people are still enjoying decades later. And definitely Half Pint had a lot of personality, a lot of energy and enthusiasm in his records. Another one's one I've only had on CD for some years. This is Michael Smith, aka Mikey Smith, Me Can't Believe It. He is a dub poet, or was a dub poet. So I think his only LP on the Mango label from 1980-ish, I think, very early 80s. Let me see here. 1982, protege of the great dub poet Linton Kwesi Johnson, called him one of the greatest voices of his generation, I believe. Got all the lyrics here. Dub poetry is a more intellectual strain of reggae, I guess you would say, heavily politicized, written in the patois language of the people, and backed by heavy dub reggae beats, which are here supplied by Dennis Bovell, I believe, and members of Aswad, as well as other UK players. Michael Smith, very political. He was quite an activist. Shortly after this LP, unfortunately, he was killed. He was at a political appearance by one of the Jamaican government ministers. He was heckling them apparently, and later on was confronted by some men and was killed by a stone thrown at his head. So very tragic end to a very talented voice. This is one I'd had on CD for many years from when I first started getting into reggae. Don't think I've ever known too much about these guys. I assumed they were Jamaican, but I think actually they were out of the US. Identity, just self-titled, appeared on Island's Mango imprint in the late 80s, 1988-ish, I'm thinking. Around that time, Island kind of made a bit of a return to the roots reggae sound, which these guys are in, and the tune Rejoice that is off of here, I found it on some kind of compilation or sampler Island put out around the time, the late 80s, early 90s, and that was one of the tracks that was on there. So kind of had a fondness for this group ever since. Identity, voiced by Dayton Charlemagne. Very obscure group. I think they did one more album, but haven't been heard from since. A new compilation from Soul Jazz Records on their reggae series. Bunny Lee, Dreads Enter the Gates with Praise. Producer Edward, aka Bunny Lee, or Striker Lee sometimes called because of all the hit singles he produced. This is, I think, Soul Jazz's first release from him. Many other labels have compiled his productions. He started out in the late 60s. He was kind of a pioneer of releasing his Jamaican productions in the UK and developing the UK as a lucrative market for reggae in the 1970s. Hugely successful with a number of singers, a lot of DJs, worked closely with King Tubby, and this compiles is 3 LPs of his productions. He's hugely prolific. You'll probably do about a dozen more of these compilations and still wouldn't come up with everything Bunny Lee put out just in the 70s alone. And the 80s, he kind of tailed off his productions in music a bit. But 2 of the singers that he worked with very closely were the late, great Slim Smith. I got this from vinyl community member Rob, aka Vinyl79. Thanks, Rob. This is a posthumous compilation on the Trojan label from the early 70s. Slim Smith passed away in 1972. I think this came out in 73. I may do a longer video on Slim Smith at some point. Always looking to add him to my collection. Great singer who passed away far too young. And also from Rob, I got this one, another protege of Bunny Lee. Johnny Clark authorized version. This is a release on the Virgin label in the 1970s, 1976-ish, I think, 78 maybe, 76. Early Virgin label, authorized version, produced by Bunny Lee. Johnny Clark was one of his most reliable hit makers through the 1970s, sometimes known as the studio idler early on. He would be hanging around the studio, fetching food for everybody, waiting for his chance to get at the mic. When his chance came, he ran with it and released a series of sides and albums with Bunny Lee through the 1970s that were hugely successful. He was right up there with Dennis Brown, with Gregory Isaacs, and the top singers of the day. So thanks to Rob for supplying me with those. Last up, we got some VCLT from Trish. Beach Time 2019. Sun's out right now. It's sunny and warm, so it's definitely beach time here. Great compilation of surf tunes and some soca, looks like. Joe Mensa, Shakamo, I think I turned you on to that one, Trish. She's also sent me a nice card with some stickers on there. So always nice to get one of Trish's latest mixes. So that's what I've got for you right now, I think, guys. Definitely got a few more things to share very soon. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Cheers. Take care.